As we're preparing for the Burning Crusade to re-release on Anniversary, there's been a lot of discussion about what gear to hang on to and what you can safely vendor or disenchant. Whilst it's true that a lot of your hard-earned gear will be replaced relatively quickly, especially those from earlier raids in Classic, there will be a lot of things worth hanging on to or indeed preparing now before you cross the Dark Portal. Today we're going to cover a bunch of items, from consumables, trinkets and specific gear pieces from Classic that maintain their value well into TBC. Some of these will be best in slot for certain situations, whilst others will just remain useful to have at hand. So whatever role you play within the game, there will be something for you here. With that said, we'll begin with consumables. Let's kick things off with one of the most talked about consumables for casters heading into TBC, which is Brilliant Wizard Oil, that gives a bunch of spell damage and most importantly still gives critical strike rating. Now there is a new rank of Wizard Oil from TBC which gives even more spell power, but here's the thing, this new rank Superior Wizard Oil doesn't have any critical strike rating on it, and for the vast majority of casters the crit rating is worth more than the extra spell damage would be. Crit is incredibly important, especially for the likes of mages or warlocks, and it's only really Shadow Priest that wants raw spell power. To craft Brilliant Wizard Oil you'll need to be an enchanter with 300 skill, as well as honoured with the Zandalar tribe. Both of these are doable right now in vanilla, and for the materials, each oil will need 2 large brilliant shards, 3 fire bloom and 1 imbued vial. Now the large brilliant shards can be a bit tricky to come by in TBC since fewer people will be running the level 60 content that drops them, so if you are planning to play a caster in TBC, it may be worth getting hold of some of these items now before prices start to go up too much. I've mentioned it in previous videos, but it definitely applies here, and that's the fact that scrolls are definitely worth keeping into TBC. Whilst there is a new rank 5 variant of scrolls in TBC that gives plus 20 to main stats such as strength or agility, scrolls also of course exist in vanilla too, and despite the rank 4 version in vanilla only giving plus 17 to a main stat, it's still a pretty good alternative if you are trying to get the most out of your raiding character whilst not wanting to spend the absolute most on the highest rank of scroll. So if you do come by any rank 4 scrolls in vanilla now, definitely hang on to them. Free action potions also deserve a special mention here. These potions make you immune to movement impairing effects, as well as immune to stuns for 30 seconds. In TBC there are several boss encounters and moments in heroic dungeons where, above all as the tank, it can be very useful to pop a free action potion before you run in and enter combat. These potions are one of the most powerful consumables from vanilla that don't get nerfed in TBC, and they're also very easy to make, requiring a pretty low alchemy level and some materials which tend to be pretty cheap. Another consumable which rises in value in TBC will be the elixir of demon slaying, and TBC as an expansion is of course absolutely packed with demon bosses across the entire experience. We're talking about a significant portion of bosses in the Black Temple as well as Mount Hyjal, so for both melee DPS and hunters who are min-maxing, stacking elixir of demon slaying for these fights will provide a big DPS gain. In fact, this elixir gives even more attack power than the new TBC flask does, albeit it will be much more expensive to upkeep, both because of the materials still being from vanilla, which again people won't be farming that much anymore, and the fact that it lasts 5 minutes instead of the 60 minutes that flasks last for. That being said, the materials for this elixir, as well as its recipe, can be farmed in vanilla right now, so that might be something you want to prepare. I should also give a mention to dark runes as well as demonic runes for a consumable. These are interesting because they function differently from mana potions. Both dark runes and demonic runes are functionally the same item, it's just demonic runes are not tradable but dark runes are, and they both restore your mana at the cost of a small amount of health. Most importantly though, they share a cooldown with your health stone instead of your mana potions, so if you're playing a class that may be going during certain encounters, these can be nice to have to hand. Dark runes drop from mobs in Scholarmance and can already be farmed at level 60, although things will be much easier at level 70, specifically from the necromancers and dark summoners inside the instance, whereas demonic runes are from high level demons mostly in the open world in places such as Ashara, Winterspring and Felwood. Now there is some criticisms here about how useful these will realistically be in TBC since we are confirmed to be getting post-nerf content, and if the content is post-nerf there may just be less reliance on the these types of consumables. Nevertheless, your raid may, for example, run less healers than they ordinarily would to stack more DPS because it is post-nerf, so they still very well may have a use case. Either way, both Demonic Rune and Dark Rune are a unique way to restore mana, and there's nothing equivalent to this in TBC, so if you want to go farm them now, you can definitely do that. Classic flasks are also definitely still worth a mention, but with a few caveats here. Of course, in Classic you can only create flasks in special alchemy labs found in Scholomance as well as Blackwing Lair. When TBC hits, you'll simply just be able to go to Shattrath City and craft them there, but until then you're going to be limited to these classic locations. Of course, the majority of vanilla flasks are still very powerful, and there's one that gets changed significantly, which is Distilled Wisdom. Instead of just increasing your maximum mana, it now gives a bunch of intellect in TBC instead, which can be considered useful for certain specs such as, for example, Holy Paladin or maybe even Arcane Mage who care a lot about this stat. On top of that, the healing flask for TBC, Flask of Mighty Restoration, only gives 25 mana per 5 instead of actual healing, which means often for consumables healers will go back to using elixirs instead, but I thought that this vanilla flask might be worth a mention as an alternative if you are indeed playing a class that benefits a lot from intellect. There are also some items from vanilla which don't exactly have practical uses, but they're also very nice to have, such as Savory Deviate Delight that turns you into a pirate or a ninja for 60 minutes. Also, there are Noggin Fogger elixirs too, though you do have to do the quest line to unlock it, but again that can be something else to do in vanilla now whilst you're waiting for TBC to release. But on top of changing your form, this has some useful effects too, such as applying a slow fall, which can be useful here and there. Next, let's talk about a few items for each role within the game which are going to remain very powerful in TBC. One of the best healer trinkets throughout Classic that remains relevant in TBC is Scarab Brooch. This makes it so your heal effects provide a damage absorption shield equal to 15% of the amount healed, lasting 30 seconds. The reason this trinket is so good is because it scales off a percentage of your healing, so as your gear increases and your numbers increase, the effectiveness of this trinket does too. Rather unfortunately though, Scarab Brooch drops from Viscidus and AQ40, who is both an optional boss and usually a pretty annoying boss to go out of your way to do. But if you're still raiding AQ40, it's definitely one to have on your wish list, as it's something that you'll be able to continually get use out of after all your other vanilla trinkets have been replaced. There is another healing trinket for people in TBC, particularly for healers who care about stacking spirit, and that is Dark Moon card Blue Dragon. This card has a 2% chance on spellcast to allow 100% of your mana regeneration to continue whilst casting for 15 seconds. Now the proc rate is still the same, but when it does proc, it can give you a significant chunk of your mana back during a long fight. It's not going to be the best for every healer in every situation, but it's another option to have available, especially during progression when mana management may be tight. To get this trinket, you'll need to turn in the full beast deck to the Dark Moon Fair, making it a bit more of an investment to put together, but one that you can go and do now. For tank items, you have to give a mention to Stylene's Impending Scarab. This is dropped from Blackwing Lair and just gives you a ton of bonus stats, which especially shield tanks will care about above all. It also gives you a bunch of defense, which is a stat you're going to want to cap out as soon as possible in TBC, so that you can avoid mobs in heroic dungeons from absolutely deleting you. And while Stylene's is just a bunch of passive stats, it remains incredibly powerful. Another similar trinket for tanking is Glyph of Deflection, and this one's from Sapphiron in Naxxramas. Similar to Stylene's, this one's really geared towards shield tanks, except in this case it has an on-use effect, which increases the block value of your shield by a massive amount for 20 seconds. Above all, if you're playing things such as Protection Warrior or Paladin, either of these trinkets are going to be really nice to have. For melee DPS, one of the best known classic items that remains valuable in TBC is Badger the Swarm Guard. This is one of the very few items in vanilla which gives you armor penetration, which is a really powerful stat to have active, above all for trash mobs where they're not always going to have full stacks of sunder on them or exposed armor. If you're planning to level through spamming dungeons early on, this trinket is really nice to have and will always be something that you want to use on cooldown. For melee DPS too, Fetish of the Sam Reaver is also really nice. It has an on-use effect that reduces your threat generated by 70% for 20 seconds. This one also drops from AQ 40. Now this one actually does get nerfed in TBC. The threat reduction scales down as you level past 60. So at 60 you're getting the full 70% reduction, and by level 70 it's a 50% threat reduction. All that said, this is still incredibly valuable. If you didn't know, melee will pull aggro if they exceed 110% of the tank's current threat, compared to range having to achieve 130%, and this is absolutely still a nice trinket to have in TBC, and again will be great for spamming dungeons. Let's cover a few ones for casters now. Special mention to Mind Quickening Gem. This is from Veilstraz in Blackwing Lure, and in TBC it still increases your haste rating by 330 for 20 seconds, which at level 70 should be about a 20% haste increase instead of the 33% that it is in vanilla. One thing you should know is that originally in TBC and in TBC Classic during 2021, there was a period of time where MQG stacked with Icy Veins and mages could get below the 1 second GCD. However, Blizzard went and target nerfed this, so the GCD cannot go below 1 second anymore. So whilst Mind Quickening Gem does still remain very good, it's not quite as good as it used to be. All the same though, if you did manage to get one, it's definitely going to remain a very powerful trinket. Eye of Diminution is a caster trinket that drops from Thaddeus in Naxxramas, and it's kind of like the caster version of Fetish of the Sand Reaver, and similar to that trinket, its threat reduction does scale down as you level. At level 60 you're getting the full 35% threat reduction, and by the time you're 70 you're looking at approximately a 25% threat reduction. It has some critical strike rating on it too, which is always nice to have for casters as well, but if you're playing things such as Mage or Warlock, again for dungeon spam, threat reduction is just incredibly valuable, so this one can be nice to pick up if you're going to be spamming dungeons. Finally, for casters, one trinket which is available super early in vanilla and will be used for an extremely long time in TBC will be Nilfarian's Tear, which is of course from Nefarian in Blackwing Lure. I know when I was playing through TBC during Classic, I had this trinket and I was still using it well into tier 4, both because of the amount of spell damage that it gave and the fact that it had so much hit rating on it at the same time. It was genuinely a difficult trinket to replace, and as a caster this is probably one of the vanilla items that lasted me the longest in TBC. So if you have one of these, absolutely have it in your bags going into the expansion, and if you don't yet, well, maybe there will still be time for you to pick one up. The key takeaway here is that not everything from Classic needs to be thrown away or replaced the moment you hit Outland. Whilst it's true that much of your tier gear and weapons will be replaced relatively quickly as you're questing and doing dungeons, a lot of items, particularly trinkets and consumables, maintain their value for a long time, in some cases permanently. So if you're still raiding in Classic during the pre-patch period or even before that, it would be worth prioritizing some of these items to make your journey through TBC that much better. And of course for the consumables I covered, you can prepare materials for them now. I'm sure prices will already be moving because people are anticipating these items changing or remaining useful, but they're still nice to know about in the event that you can make the most of it. There are definitely more items than this worth mentioning, but those are a few which I think you should know about as a first step. So let me know if you'd include any other items here and what kind of preparation you're putting into the TBC pre-patch in advance of it dropping. And as always, thank you all so much for watching and listening in, and I'll see you all in the next one very soon.